All right, so I apologize for that long, annoying process of trying to get you guys logged in and whatever, but it should make your life better as the semester goes on. At least that's the hope. And hopefully everything will stick correctly and what have you. If it doesn't, we can go in individually and try to fix your computers on an individual basis. For those of you that don't have V-Ray right now, I made sure that Chuck knew. He had the notes already. He apparently is going to try to install it later today once classes are done in this room. So we should be fine. You don't need V-Ray yet anyway. We're going to go back in time a bit and actually work in 2 dimensions for right now because you need basic fundamental skills. And before we can get real good basic fundamental skills, we have to kind of start at the beginning. And so I'm going to talk through the very basics. For those of you that took 135 with me previously, this will look shockingly similar to the AutoCAD section, right? If you look at the back plan, it looks almost exactly the same, right? And that is because it's a good way of learning some basic skills. You will also find, if you remember that stuff from the AutoCAD, that this will be a breeze to get through, okay? Which is good. That's the way it should be. The truth of the first few days in this class is that I have to start assuming you guys know absolutely nothing. Okay, and so we have to start at the very beginning. Some of you will think this is really, really easy, and that's okay, right? I promise you we'll get to the point where you will be challenged too, okay? But for right now, enjoy that it's easy, okay? And for those of you that have never worked in it before, it'll be harder, and that's okay too. And that's why you're here, and there's no prerequisite for the class, so we're all going to get through it together. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of talk through some of the basics. Yeah? Take a quick look. Ah, yes, the old Rhino Cam. Just run the free mill, that's fine. Rhino's notorious for having random things pop up. So when in doubt, just start clicking and it'll go away. Okay? I know, it's a real scientific approach, right? Okay, so what we're going to start with today is we're going to start with basic 2D drawing. And in order for me to explain 2D drawing in this context, we have to talk a little bit about maybe, let's say, high school math. Okay, way back when. I know it's impossible for you guys to remember back that far, but at least for me, it's completely impossible. Maybe I blocked that out permanently from my life. I don't know. No, actually, high school was pretty fun. Anyway, so in the world of AutoCAD, everything is defined by math. And so when we have a line, we have 2 coordinates and a line that connects those 2 coordinates, right? If we had an array, we'd have an algebraic function that said this is the start point through this point, and it's this slope, etc. So if you guys remember back to that, in high school, we had like a sheet of graph paper, and on that graph paper, you drew an X, right, or a big plus sign. And you had a x-axis that went off horizontally, and you had a y-axis that went off vertically. The same thing exists in the world of Rhino. So we have, right, an origin point like this. We have an origin point right there, and that's represented by the intersection of the red line and the green line on our screen. Okay? That intersection is called point 0, 0. So if you remember back to that old high school math class that you were in, we have an x coordinate, comma, y coordinate as where it is in space, right? So if we had a point that was out here, right, that was say 2 points over, there's 1, there's 2, right? This would be 2 in the x direction followed by a 0 because it's nothing in the y direction, right? Likewise, if we had the same point up here, this would be 0, 2. Right? You guys remember this a little bit? Sounds vaguely familiar. Right? Don't worry, we won't actually have to do any math in this class. But I like to talk through this. If we had this point that was right out here, right, that point would be 2, 2. Okay? So we have this same underlying thing underneath Rhino and AutoCAD for that matter. And it's mathematically precise. So we could add decimal places. We could go to 16 decimal places, and it would be that precise. Right? In practice, it's usually, we shoot for about a 16th. It's reasonable, okay, in terms of precision. So if I were to go in the negative direction, of course I could have negative coordinates. I should have remembered that, right? So if I went, there's 1, and I had this point, it would be -1, -1. Right? All of these coordinates are called absolute coordinates, which means they are absolute in the context of the world that we're seeing on the computer screen. So 0, 0 is always 0, 0. Doesn't move around. We'll talk about something in a second called relative coordinates, where 0, 0 moves, okay, in just a second. So let's go ahead and let's start drawing a little bit. We, of course, want to make sure that we're in inches before we get started. So at the bottom here, we come across and we make sure that we're in inches. If we're not in inches, go ahead and type units. Oops. And we're going to make sure that our model units are set in inches. Okay? It's important that we at least all start at that place. Okay? When I'm done setting up that as inches, I'll go ahead and say OK. And for right now, since we're only drawing in 2 dimensions, I'm going to just look at the top view. So I'm going to double click on the word top, and I get just a very large top view of this particular drawing. Okay? This actually is shockingly similar to AutoCAD. If you get rid of the other 3D part, this is essentially AutoCAD. Okay? So we're going to start working through this coordinate system, and we're going to start by initiating our drawing at point 0, 0. So I'm going to come to the tools over here. I'm going to pick the Polyline tool, which is the one directly below the arrow. I could also type the key command Pline to get a polyline. The difference between a polyline and a regular line is a polyline is continuous through a set of points. So I can continue drawing. Yeah? Your tools are missing. The left side is missing? How nice, right? You can go to your tools, go to toolbar layout, and at the bottom there's a restore defaults. Okay, click on that, say OK. It'll warn you that you have to restart Rhino. When you restart Rhino, it'll finish the tools. Okay? It probably means that that'll make your V-Ray toolbars go away, but it doesn't really matter for today anyway. Okay? Restore defaults. So under Tools, Toolbar Layout, at the bottom there is Restore Defaults. Okay? So I'm going to continue on. You guys try to do that and let me know. I'm going to go ahead and start with the Polyline tool. And with Rhino, I can specify a coordinate by typing this coordinate value, just like in the world of math. So I'm going to start at 0, 0. So 0 in the x, 0 in the y. And when I hit enter, it'll start my line right at the intersection of the red and the green axes, or the x and the y axes. Okay? It shouldn't be a problem. So at this point, I want to continue drawing, and I'm going to go ahead and use coordinates. So let's say that I had a line, or I wanted a line to be 24 feet long, right, going up the y direction. I could type in my next value, which would be 0, 24, and then an apostrophe for feet. So just like we did here, 0, 2, right, I can do 0, 24 feet. And when I hit enter, I will then have a line that's 24 feet long. It makes no difference that my line went off of the grid. Okay, the grid is completely arbitrary. I can make it bigger, I can make it smaller. It just gives us a reference point. Okay, so I've gone 0, 0. The next point was 0, 24 feet. Now I want to go 12 feet over. So I'm going to go ahead and type 12 feet, 24 feet. Oops, not 214, 24 feet. And then I'll hit enter on the keyboard there as well. And so that then puts this point out at 12 feet over and 24 feet up. Okay, don't worry, I'm going to do this multiple times too. Okay? So those are, as I said before, absolute coordinates. So they're always relative to point 0, 0, no matter where you are in space. The problem comes where you might get to a point where you don't really know where your point is away from 0, 0. So the next point, I want to go 6 feet down from this point. I want to go right there. And if I were typing it in, I'd have to say, OK, well, what's 24 minus 6? OK, that would be 18. and I want to go over 12, so it would be 12 comma 18. But that's math, and we don't want to do math. Okay? So we can use something called a relative coordinate instead of an absolute coordinate. And we actually used this last class a little bit. And what a relative coordinate is it says, okay, pretend for a moment that the last point that I clicked is 0, 0. So all I have to do is know where that point is and where do I want to go from there. So in this case, I want to go down 6 inches from my last click. So it would be 0 comma negative 6. But I need some way of telling Rhino I want to say relative to the last point. So we use the @ sign, the email sign. So I say at, so from the last point, 0 comma negative 6 feet. Okay, and then I'll hit enter. By the way, this is written out on your exercise 202 handout, the exact same order that I'm going in. And the other thing that you'll find, and I try hard to do this on handouts and everything that's online, there's like a font change when I type something in. It looks kind of like a typewriter. It's kind of bold. You guys see that? Okay? That means I typed it in to the command line. And so I'm trying to distinguish that so that you guys know I'm typing that value in. Okay? So I've gone ahead and I've typed at 0 comma negative 6 feet, and I've gone down 6 feet. If I wanted to continue in this relative coordinate sense, I would start again with the @ sign to say relative to the last point that I clicked. Now I want to go 12 in the x direction and 0 in the y direction. So it would be 12 feet, comma, 0. And I'll go ahead and hit enter. Now I've drawn 12 feet over. I can continue in this same vein, and I could say at, so relative to the last point. Now I want to go 0 comma negative 12 feet, and then enter. Okay? And of course I know I've done this a lot longer than you guys have, so translating these in my head backwards and forwards from relative to absolute is fairly easy because I have more practice. Okay? For you guys it takes a little bit more thinking through it, and that's why I have the little cheat sheet for you guys to follow along as I do this. Okay? So now I could type in, let's say I'll switch back to having absolute coordinates. It would be 12 comma 6. So I could just type in 12 feet, comma 6 feet, and hit enter. That would be that point. Or I could say at negative 12 comma 0. Interchangeable. Okay? So the last point, if I was doing absolute, would be 12 feet, comma 0. And then I can come back, and I could either snap, or I could actually specify 0 comma 0 as my starting point. Okay? So I drew this line all the way around. The absolute coordinates, so the relative to the origin of 0, 0, work nicely when you are drawing right on 0, 0. If, however, I started over here on a point that I don't really know where it is, it would be very difficult for me to come up with the mathematical starting points for these. So in this instance, it would be far better to use the relative coordinates of at 0 comma 24 feet, and then continue. So this would be at 12 feet, comma 0, and I could work my way around this as well. So those are the coordinate systems, and it's important for you to understand that they exist. Now let's talk about how you would actually draw. Okay? This is a lot of math, and it's a lot of thinking. Generally speaking, if you're working in something like Rhino, it's a lot easier to know where you want the point and how far you want it to be from something else. So we're going to use a point and distance method instead. And this is how you're going to typically draw in Rhino. So let's move over a little bit. Let's say right here. Doesn't matter exactly where. I'm going to click to start. I'm going to move the cursor in the direction I want to go, and I'm going to specify a length. So we'll say 24 feet, and then enter. Now it's going to say which direction I want it to go up, and I can continue on. So I'll type 12 feet. Notice there's no @ sign, there's no commas, it's just the distance. I want to go in that direction. I want to go 6 feet in that direction. I want to go 12 feet in this direction. I want to go 12 feet in this direction. You can see this is a lot faster, right? So we'll go 12 feet there, 6 feet there, and we'll close it. All right. So once again, I'm going to delete these. Polyline, doesn't matter where I start, and I'm going to go 24 feet in that direction, 12 feet there, 6 feet there, 12 feet there, 12 feet there, 12 feet there, 6 feet there. And that's very much how AutoCAD would work, or any of the major drawing programs. Okay? So it's relatively simple to work your way through. Once I have this, it's time to start actually working and manipulating with this. So the first command that we're going to use is the offset command. So let me go ahead and I'm going to select this. I'm going to type Z for zoom and then E for extents, which will zoom in to show just this one object for me. All right, there it is. And now I'm going to use the offset command. And I can either type offset, or I can go up to curve. Curve, where is it? Offset curve. There, curve, offset, offset curve. Okay? So again, I can type offset. It's indicated on part 2 in bold in that typewriter font that I can type offset to get to it. Or I can go up to curve, offset, curve, offset, offset, curve. And if I look at the command line, it asks me to select a curve to offset. Okay, so obviously I'm going to want this curve. But before I do that, I need to know the distance that I want to offset. So if we look at the first option here, it says distance. The D is capitalized, so I can type D, enter, or I can click on distance. And when I do that, I want to type in the offset distance. So in this case, it's going to be 6 followed by the quotation mark for inches, and I'll hit enter. Okay? So my distance is set to 6. Now I can select the curve to offset. So I'll select my little wall here. And then it asks side to offset. So do I want it toward the outside or toward the inside? So in this case, I want it toward the inside. So I move my mouse inside the shape, and I click. And it makes a second line. Okay, so I'm going to do that again. I will go up to curve, offset, offset curve. And then I will select my curve to offset. There it is. I can specify a distance. It's currently 6, so that's fine. That's the way I want it. And then I'll specify a side to offset. And so we want it to go toward the inside. There it is. And it makes my offset for me. Relatively easy. Okay? So now that I have an offset, it's time to start adding some doors and windows. So let's start at the top here, and I'm just zooming in with my scroll wheel. I'm going to start at the top right there, and I'll use my polyline, and I'm going to use my object snaps at the bottom. I'm going to make sure mid is checked. Okay? With mid checked, when I move the mouse toward the middle of this line, my snap automatically jumps and I see the little mid show up, right? I know I'm going to be right on the middle. I come down to the lower line here. I get 2 snaps. So unlike AutoCAD, which flashes between symbols, right? We get a quick little text version that says perpendicular and midpoint. So it's both perpendicular and the midpoint. Then I'll go ahead and click on that point, and I'll hit enter. Okay, so now I have this little line that represents the middle of this wall, and I need to offset it. We just used offset, both sides, by half the door. Remember, on the back side, I have some loose measurements. You're not doing any dimensions on this today. Okay, it's just guides for you so you know how big things are. It's 3 feet, so half of 3 feet is 18 inches. So I need to offset this by 18 inches. So I'm going to go back to curve, and then to offset, offset curve. Select curve to offset. There it is. Distance needs to be 18. Okay? If I didn't know 18, I could do 1 apostrophe 6 quotation for 1 foot 6 inches. That would work too. And I'll hit enter. And it translates to 18, you can see. So I can do it to one side and I can do it to the other side. Or if I look at my options up here, I also have the option for both sides, which is pretty cool. So let's click both sides, and it'll offset both directions at once and give me both this line, and that line. Okay? Now that I have those two lines in place, right, I'll go ahead and come in and select this line in the middle there. And this is a good point to kind of point out how selections work. This is very similar to AutoCAD, right? If I select from the left side to the right side, it selects anything that is completely contained within my object. So if I start from the left and go over here to the right, I get all three of those objects. If, however, I start from the right and go to the left, it's anything touching this selection. So I get the three objects and the lines that go beyond the box. So it takes a little bit of getting used to as to which direction you're selecting from, but it can make a big difference. So for right now, I'm going to select from the left to the right, just that middle line, and then I'll press the delete key on the keyboard. I could also type DEL for delete. Just a matter of which is faster for you. So now that I have this line and this line, I also have my lines that represent the walls. I need to perform something called trim, and that is to get rid of this line segment that I don't want. So just like in AutoCAD, I can go up and it's under, I think it's under Edit. Yeah, Edit and then Trim. And it's going to ask to select the cutting objects first. So this line and this line are doing my cutting. So I'll go ahead and hit Enter. And then it says select an object to trim. Well, it would be this line there, and it would be this line there. Okay? One disadvantage of Rhino versus AutoCAD is AutoCAD previews the trim. And you may have noticed that if you've worked in AutoCAD. It'll make the line go away when you move over it. Rhino doesn't do that. It is what it is. Okay? I can, however, also drag through these two objects and trim them both at once. So when you have a lot of objects and you want to trim, you can drag through and do a group trim, so to speak. So once I've done this trim, I'll go ahead and hit Enter. And I now have a hole cut in this side of the wall. Okay? And I'll come back and I'll do this trim again for you guys. So I'm just going to undo and get back to here, and I'll do it again. Like I said, in this stage of the game, I repeat myself a lot. Okay? And if it's easy for you, life is good. All right? So let me continue. Polyline, I have midpoint checked. I'm going to go from the middle to the middle. I'll hit Enter. Then I'm going to offset this curve. So I'll go to Curve, Offset, Offset Curve. Select Curve to Offset. There's my curve. My distance, I do want to be 18, or 1 foot 6 inches. Enter. And I want to offset both sides. So I'm going to click on both sides so it does it both at once. And I'll go ahead and click. And I get this line and that line. Now that I have this line and that line, I'll go ahead and delete the middle line because I don't need that anymore. And I'll go ahead and trim, Edit, Trim, or I'll type Trim. Select my cutting objects. It would be this line and this line. I'll press Enter. And then I will click on that and that to make them go away. Okay? And when I'm done, I'll hit Enter to finish. And now I have that hole through my door. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and join these lines together. So I'm going to select from the right to the left. And I'm going to go to Edit, Join, or I'll type Join, or press Control-J. And I end up with a continuous line that goes all the way around. Okay? So now that I've done that and I've joined it, now it's time to draw a window. Okay, so I'm going to move on and draw a window. I'll start with my Polyline tool again. And what typically happens when people start working in Rhino is they say, okay, well, I need to draw a window, and I know that it is 18 inches from this corner. So I'll just click on the corner, and then I'll draw over 18 inches. There it is. And then I'll draw down, and now I have my first line. Okay, there's a problem here, though, in that the line that you just drew is actually an L. And as soon as we start to do extrusions, we're going to have overlapping surfaces. It's not going to render nice. It's not clean. So we have to fix that first. So we're going to use something, and this works extraordinarily well in Rhino, called smart tracking. And this is something I really want you guys to practice today and make sure that you understand how it works. So I'm going to use a polyline, just like I did before. And as I move my mouse over this corner, you see that my point turns white. You guys see how that happens? It turns white. Once the point is white, without clicking, I'm just going to move my mouse to the right. And as I do that, I get a white line and the point turns blue. Okay? This is smart tracking. I can now type in a distance and it will start that distance from the blue dot. So I could type in 1 foot 6 inches and my line will start 1 foot 6 inches from that point. And I can now draw down perpendicular, enter, and that is just a single line. There's no line across the top. So if I were to continue using that, I could use my polyline. My window was 2 feet wide, so I'd set my point there. There it is. It turns white. I move over, okay, and then I can specify 2 feet. Now the problem here is it accidentally created a second point. You see that? Okay, I don't want that point. I'll hover over it. It should go away, and then we'll come back, and I'll type 2 feet. So it's always 2 feet from that little blue point once you have the white line. And I'll go ahead and press enter. Okay, let me practice that again over on this side. So we'll set our point. We'll move over, and I'll type what was it? 18 inches. There. I'll finish. I'm going to repeat the command again. I'll start there. I'll move over by 2 feet, and I'll draw that line. So it's a really good habit to get into when you're working in Rhino to use this smart tracking. Okay. Now that I have those set, I'll go ahead and draw lines in the centers of these windows to represent the windows. So I'll just snap from center to center and from center to center. By the way, as you're drawing, right, if I have, right, let's say that I draw from middle to middle and I hit enter. If I want to repeat the polyline again, I can just right click and it'll repeat the same command again, and I can draw that as well. You should have ortho on. All right, well, I can take a look.
So basically you have like a three-sided line for the window. How many lines make up your window?
So the lines that make up the window are this line, and that line.
Okay.
Right?
How do you get
This loop goes all the way around.
Okay, because like right now I have the 2 feet line too.
You have a line that goes across the top here.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to want to get rid of that line.
Okay.
Okay, if it's connected, okay, let me do a quick illustration here. Okay, so let's say that I went over, this is 18 inches, like that, and then I drew a line that went 2 feet, and then went to there like that. So I ended up with that. Okay, if that's the case, I need to explode this into 2 segments. So I'll go to, I think it's under Edit, Explode, or I can type Explode, and then I can pick just this single segment of it and get rid of it. Okay? This will matter when we do our extrusions. And we won't do extrusions until next class, but it's part of our keeping it clean. Question? Uh-huh. Does it say Smart Track in bold at the bottom of yours? At the bottom of the screen, center, right? There. It should be bold. Okay, if it's not bold, you have to click on it, make it bold. And if not, I can come in and try to help you through it. Okay? All right, so let me go ahead and finish up. I'll draw this across. Now we could get more technical. I could do an offset with a distance of, I don't know, maybe a quarter of an inch, both sides. I can make 2 little panes of glass. I could get rid of the one in the middle. You can, of course, complicate things. But we're shooting for the basics for right now. Okay? So I'm going to continue. And let's say that I want this window to exist down here at the bottom. Okay? I could, of course, come over here, start drawing from here, 18 inches, and I could draw the window. But since I've already drawn it here, and the window down here matches up, I could select this, and I could mirror this down to this side. So I'm going to go to Transform, and then Mirror. And it's going to say Start of Mirror Plane. Okay, remember, we're working in Rhino 3D. Even though everything we're doing is two-dimensional right now, the reason it's saying plane is because if we're building in 3D, it's as if there's a plane, not just a line that we're reflecting across. So we're going to set that plane at the midpoint of this wall and go across to the midpoint over here. And it's now created that line for me. Okay? Now I want to take this window, and it needs to be, I need a copy of it that is 6 inches from this side right over there. So there's a gap of 6 inches. I can go to my Transform copy. That is different from Edit copy. There's two different copies in Rhino. Same thing in AutoCAD. Okay? So we want to go to Transform copy, or just if you type copy, you'll get there. And I'm going to use that smart tracking thing again. I'm going to set my point here on this edge. I'm going to go over 6 inches and then press Enter. And now I can move my copy from 6 inches away to right there and press Enter. It's a little trickier way of using it, but it's good practice to see if you really understand smart tracking. So once again, I take my window. I go to Transform Copy. I set a point here, go over from it 6 inches, and then I connect it, or I snap it to that side of the window, and I get those two pieces.
What was the offset for the window planes again?
I did a quarter of an inch in each direction, so they're a ½ inch apart total.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. You don't even have to do it. I'm just showing you that you can keep adding levels of detail to this. So in the interest of efficiency, I also want a window over on this wall. And it's the same distance from the corner up this way. So of course, yes, I could start here. I could go up 18 inches and I could draw it. Or I could select this. And when I do the mirror to it, I'll go to Transform Mirror. I'm going to set the mirror plane at 45 degrees. So it reflects at 45. So I'll go from there to reflect the mirror at 90 degrees to where it was. That's an advanced technique. So if I lost you a little bit there, it's okay. You can just draw it. Okay? But at the same time, that's about efficiency when you're drawing. And learning to use those kinds of things is very, very valuable. So once again, I'll show you how I did that. So I took this window. I went to Transform and then Mirror. Start of mirror plane, I picked this corner. End of mirror plane, I picked that corner. And I mirrored it across a 45-degree line. Okay? Could I copy it and rotate it? Sure. That's another way of doing it. Right? So there's always multiple ways of doing it. Okay? So I'm going to let you, these are the basic commands that we're kind of working through today. Trim, offset, polyline, and smart tracking being critical. There's a few other things that might be relevant that I'll point out to you just so that you're aware of them. And that is, if you had, let's say, a rectangle like that, and you wanted to round the corners, you can use a command called fillet. So if I go to curve, I think it's under curve, fillet curve, select first curve to fillet or radius. I'm going to pick a radius of, say, 2 inches. And I can then round. So let me do it again. Fillet, select first curve, there's my curve. Select second curve, there's my curve, and it rounds the corners. Okay? So I can do stuff like that if I wanted to. Chamfer is the same thing. I can specify this time a distance. So let's do 2 inches again. And instead of being rounded, it would clip the corner. Okay? So those are other things that you can do. Is it necessary that you learn those now? I'm just pointing them out to you. So if you feel comfortable, play around with this. If you don't feel comfortable, don't worry about it yet. We'll get you there. Okay? So the rest of the drawing that's on the back of this sheet includes some more windows and whatever. It includes some extra detail and that sort of thing. Please feel free to do whatever you want in terms of what the floor plan looks like. If you want to add stuff to it, go for it. right? This is just a guide to get you basic skills, okay? Make sure that you save this file in two different ways. Number one, we're going to save the Rhino file itself. So I'm going to go to File, Save. Okay, this is going to save a Rhino 5 3D model, which is a .3dm file. Okay, obviously you need this. I'm going to save it into my folder. So here's my live demonstrations folder. Here's exercise 202. I'm going to save it under EX202. Grant Adams, let's do fall 2017 since I have multiple versions there. And we'll go ahead and click on Save.
Spring.
Thank you. Thank you. Spring 2017. At least I got the 17 part right.
Yeah.
Right? So I'll go ahead and click Save, and that will save my Rhino file, which is really important that I save that Rhino file. I actually, for a drawing this simple, it's unlikely it's going to crash. But it would probably be better if you saved it earlier in the process rather than later, just in case, because that obviously writes the backup file. So I now have that saved, but I also need to be able to post this online. And I suggest in the handout, I think that maybe you want to print it. To me, printing never works out very well in Rhino. So we're just going to do the capture again. So I'll click this little triangle. I'm going to go to Capture to File. And this will then save a JPEG. Let me put it into my live demonstrations, today's folder, right? And this, let's see if I can get it right, is spring of 2017. And I'll go ahead and click Save, and that will give me a JPEG of what I see on the screen, which is essentially proof that I did it. Now, most of you have already posted to the course website. Some of you have not. Since some of you have not, I'm going to walk through that part. For those of you that have a million times, zone out for a while. Right? Or start working on your AutoCAD drawing. When you go to make a post on the course website and you're logged in, you'll see a black bar across the top of the page. As long as you see that black bar, there'll be this little icon for New. When you click on New, the first option is Post. That's what you're going to be creating. And again, if this is complicated, I'll walk you through it today. Okay, I'll sit with you. It's no big deal. All right? I'll click on New Post. And when I click on New Post, it will bring up this new post editor. Okay? It works very much like Word does. What you type and what you see is exactly what you're going to get. Okay? So I'm going to type in here that this is exercise 202. Okay? And all I need is proof that I did the exercise. I don't need to type any actual words. Okay? So I'm going to do that by setting what's called the featured image. So I'll scroll down. On the right side, at the very bottom, is Set Featured Image. I'll click on this Set Featured Image link. I will then click on Upload Files. I'll click on the big Select Files button. And I will pick that file that I just created. I only want you to upload the JPEG. I don't want the Rhino file. I don't need it. Okay? So we're going to go into exercise 202 here. And where's my 2017? There's my that's the Rhino file. There's the one that's the JPEG. I'll go ahead and click on Open. It will upload the file to the website. There it is. I will go ahead and click on Set Featured Image. And I can now see that there. If I scroll back up here, and this is important to get credit for your exercises, under Categories, we are in Digital Tools for Architects 136, and this is exercise 202. I want to make sure I check those boxes. Okay? So exercise 202 is checked. At that point, all I have to do is click the blue Publish button right here, and when I do that, it's effectively turning in my work. Okay? It says no writing errors were found because it's built-in spelling and grammar check and that sort of thing. Okay? So it's posting. Be done in a second. And I get a notification that the post was published. I can view the post. There it is. There's my image. I get credit. I passed. Right? So I know for those of you that have never done this, it seems a little complicated. Okay? I promise that you will pick it up very quickly and it won't be very hard. Okay? The people that have been in class doing this before, it's not hard, right? Not at all. Okay? So we'll get you there. If you struggle today, no big deal. I'll make sure that you get through it and you get your first post up. You can go ahead and go back and post your work from last class too under exercise 201. And that way you have a record of that one as well. Okay? So we've made sure we've saved the Rhino file because we will use this same file on Monday. Right? So you want to make sure you save it. You want to make sure you keep it because that way you don't have to draw it again. Question? No? Okay. Okay. Are there any questions for the whole group? No? If there aren't, then I'll start walking through and helping you. Was that whole group question or not?
I was just going to see if you could repeat that rotate the window.
The mirror? Sure.
Is that the mirror?
It's a mirror. So what I did with the mirror, we'll cover rotate next class, but with a mirror, and this is kind of it's a cheater way of doing it. It's kind of like when you do a fillet with a radius of 0. You can connect 2 lines. It's not really what it's intended for, but it works. So on the mirror, I want this to go here. If I imagine a 45-degree line, kind of like in 130, when you have the reflecting lines and you draw across, we're doing essentially the same thing. So I can take this and I can go to transform and then mirror, and I can draw a 45-degree line, essentially from there to there, and I can mirror it across the 45. Okay? So it saves a bunch of drawing.
Yeah.
Makes life efficient.
Thank you. How do I know I posted? Like, when I click on view post, after it says post, publish, it went to a 404 page.
That's weird. Okay, so I'll come and have a look at it, but you should be able to. And let me log into a different account. I'm in my administrator account, so I have lots of other options that you don't have. So give me a second, and I'll log into a student account. So that it matches up with what you guys are seeing. Okay, so now I'm in this account. If I go to the digital tools here at the top and go to dashboard, on the left side here there'll be posts, and I can go to all posts. If I click on that, it will show just posts that I've made. Okay, and if you come over here and it says published, you've effectively turned it in. If something went wrong, it should show up in this view. Okay, and I'll come and have a look at yours specifically and make sure it's working. Okay. Are there any other global questions? No? Yeah. Sure. I'll show you saving again. So in the world of Rhino, we have 2 saves to do. One is the 3DM file, the Rhino file, which is as simple as file, save, give it a name. It's a 3DM file. Okay. When we want to create the view to post online, the JPEG, the easiest thing at this stage to do is to go to this little triangle where it says top, click on the little triangle, go to capture to file. That'll make a JPEG for you. And when you do that, you can specify where it goes and save it as a JPEG. Okay? Global question? Uh-huh. It's Digital Tools for Architects 136. Yeah. I'll come and sit with you and we'll make sure you get it. All right.